This lecture is about the relationship between private virtue and public virtue. Now, one of the greatest differences between ancient and modern political thought is how the relationship between public and private virtue is conceived. I think we can best make sense of this relationship by asking the following questions. 1. Do you need to be a good person to be a good statesman? 2. Do you need to be a good person to be a good citizen? And 3. Does good government make its people good? Now, these questions need some further unpacking. Now, unpacking here is just a philosophy term for trying to clarify the question before we can actually answer it. First of all, good can have multiple meanings here. Good can either mean virtuous, as in a person with a good character, or it can mean someone who fulfills the duty of their station, regardless of their character. On the latter view, a good citizen is simply someone who fulfills the duties of citizenship. On the former view, a good citizen is also someone who aims at the right ends. They have good intentions. This is also further complicated by the fact that people have more or less expansive ideas about what good citizenship entails. Is good citizenship just about voting? Or is it an everyday quality of neighborliness and friendly disposition towards one's fellow citizens? One of the central questions is whether there is some link between one's tendency to be a good person and one's ability to faithfully fill one's duties as a citizen or as a holder of public office. For example, it has come out recently that President Donald Trump cheats outrageously at golf. For many ancient political leaders, this would be evidence of vice and dishonesty that would disqualify him from holding public office. More modern thinkers might say, not so fast. One can easily cheat at golf or even cheat on one's spouse, but be scrupulously honest in one's professional duties. There's no such thing as being honest or dishonest across the board. It's just a question of context. It's also a question of pressure. So if the context and constraints are different in different positions, then the tendency to cheat or to be honest are going to be different. Someone like Machiavelli might even say that it's necessary for those who hold political office to know how to cheat. It might make them actually better at their jobs, not worse. After all, what is a virtue in one context, Machiavelli might say, can be a vice in another. Ancient thinkers like Aristotle, though, tend to see public and private virtue as mutually reinforcing tendencies. Good politicians will tend to make good laws, and good laws will tend to help citizens be good people. Good people are going to tend to be good citizens, and good citizens are going to select good politicians who are going to make good laws, and so the cycle continues. Now, of course, in a bad political system, that cycle can turn vicious. Bad laws make people vicious and bad, which tends to make them select bad leaders. Those bad leaders then make bad laws, and we're in a vicious cycle. Now, modern thinkers like John Stuart Mill are going to be skeptical of this sort of cycle. In particular, they're more inclined to be subjectivists about individual virtue and more focused on behavior rather than character. For modern political thinkers, the task of public policy is not so much to inculcate virtue, but simply to make people behave well. Modern economists like Gary Becker see the project of lawmaking as one of setting the right penalties and making sure that the probabilities of conviction are high enough so that rational citizens will be deterred from behaving badly, or at least illegally. A person's preferences and a person's character are ultimately their own affair. What virtues they seek, modern political thinkers will say, is part of an extensive private sphere because it doesn't affect anyone else. Your character doesn't affect other people, only your behavior does. Now, Aristotle would have probably been highly critical of the modern division between public and private life. Rationality, like virtue, is something that people have to be socialized into. People's preferences are most definitely not their own private affair, according to Aristotle, because individual appetites and vices and ambition always spill over to other people and ultimately the public domain. If people are vicious, that makes it harder for everyone else to live a good life. So the good life is, for Aristotle, is not something you pursue in private, but something that you pursue with others. And your success does not just depend on you and the existence of good laws, but it depends on the good character of your fellow citizens. And so, therefore, you have a legitimate interest, and the government has a legitimate interest in making sure that all your fellow citizens are virtuous. Of course, the moderns are still very skeptical of these sorts of claims. Your idea of virtue and my idea of virtue may not necessarily be the same thing. Your idea of the good life and my idea of the good life, again, not necessarily the same thing. What we need from others is not virtue, but predictable behavior so that we can order our actions and make long-term plans. What's inside people's hearts is not the government's affair. Plus, knowledge of the good, whatever that is not a given. It's something that can only emerge through experience and trial and error. What might have been thought good 1,000 or 2,000 years ago may not be thought of as good today. One more thing. The state is not infallible. So vesting powers into the state is something that modern political thinkers are much more skeptical of than ancient political thinkers. The state, of course, today is much larger and much more destructive than it was at the time of Aristotle and Plato. Well-motivated state intervention can easily backfire and affect millions or billions of people. And poorly motivated states can start world wars that can affect nearly everybody on the planet negatively. And so we should think long and hard before we invest the state with the power to manipulate the character of its citizens. Now, the ancients have things that they could say in response to this. The back and forth between ancients and moderns does not end there. But this lecture definitely has to end sometime. And of course, if you have questions, please feel free to get in touch.